Hi, I'm Karla Schafer, Auntie's Beads designer, and today we're going to learn how to use leather crimping ends. Now we'll go over the list of supplies needed for this project, and I'm using a variety of beads. I'm using some lampwork beads, and I'm also going to use assorted colors and shapes in Swarovski crystal and in sterling silver bali beads. I am, however, going to be using a specific crimping end, and this one is a 2mm crimp end, and I'm going to be using this with the Greek leather. And the Greek leather is a little finer leather, so the 2mm works really well with this. For cowhides and suedes, the 3mm crimping ends would be better. We're also going to be using beading wire because we are going to bead a section in between the leather ends. So you will also need for tools a pair of chain nose pliers, and this is to crimp the crimping ends. You'll need some nipper tools to cut the leather and the beading wire. And I will be using a magical crimp tool for my crimps, and sometimes it's nice to have a pair of tweezers. We will also be needing two 6mm split rings, and this is to apply the clasps to the end of the leather. I went ahead and laid out the pattern of my beads, and the next thing that we need to do is to go ahead and cut our leather. And what I already know based on how long this is about 9 inches, that I'm going to cut each end of the leather ends to about 4.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and measure the leather out and cut the leather, and then I'm going to cut another piece. And then we're going to apply the crimp ends before we do the stringing. And all you need to do is is place the little crimp in on the end of the leather, and you want it to come up to the top just where you can see it over through the eye. And I like using chain nose pliers because they tend to fit right in that little groove, but you can also use round nose. You just smash the middle part. I always do one side and then the other. And then what you've done is you've crimped that to the leather. And then we're going to go ahead and crimp the other end because we are going to bead into these eyes. Of course, you can make this as long as you like, as short as you like. I'm making my beaded portion a little longer than my ends. That's just a matter of design. You could shorten the amount of, lessen the amount of beads you have, and then of course make your leather ends longer. And I'm going to do the other end. Okay, we're going to place the crimp end on the end of the leather, and then you just simply mash the center channel of the crimp end. And then I flip it over and crimp the other end. Now we've got on our end. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut our beading wire, and I like to cut my beading wire at least 3 to 4 inches longer than what I need. So I'm just going to measure that off of the bead board. And I'm going to crimp one end of my wire into the end of one of the ends of the leather with the crimp eyes on them. So I'm just going to take a crimp bead. And my personal choice is the magical crimping tool. That's my favorite crimp tool. So I'm not much of a on the regular crimp tool, so I'm going to use the magical crimper, and what it does is it makes this crimp bead look like a 2mm bead when you're done. And I think it has a nice clean look to it, especially when you're doing something like this where you're going to see this in the front of your work. You put the crimp in the little slot, and it pinches it to where it almost looks like a little ravioli, where it's got 4 corners smashed, and then you just rotate it around 90 degrees till it forms this round bead. And you got your crimp, and then you're ready to string your beads on. And as I said before, I just laid out my pattern in the channels, and all I'm going to do is string the beads on the wire. And the first bead that you string on, you want it to cover up the tail of the wire that you left down here by the crimp. I like to do things kind of random, not so much in a symmetrical fashion, and that's the way this piece is. If you have to have a pattern, then obviously you would just lay it out that way. I work a little bit like this, but some people don't like to do things this way. That's kind of my style. After I have strung all the beads on the beading wire, then all I'm going to do is crimp this other end into the other piece of leather with the crimp eyes, and then we'll apply the clasp. So all I did was I strung on this crimp bead, and I put it through the eye, and I'm going to run it back through the crimp bead, and I'm going to run it through these 2 crystals. And I'm going to tighten it up. You want to make sure that it's has some movement, but you don't want a bunch of slack. And then I'm going to again crimp with the magic crimping tool. And then trim the excess wire with the nipper tool, and then we'll be ready to put the split rings on the ends. And you can use a split ring plier or tweezers. I actually prefer tweezers, but you should not use your fingernails because it is bad for your nails. So what you do is you just open up the split with the tweezers, and then what you're going to do is just slide it onto this other end of the eye, and then while it's still open, go ahead and slip on the loop of the toggle, one side of the toggle, and then just, when it's on, do the other one, the other end, the other part of the toggle. Now we have completed our necklace.